Hey there, thank you for watching. So I was going to do this video based on the striped umbrella, but I decided not to. I decided to do the video based on the Stage 5 website right here. Now, one, I have a little scratch in my throat, so I might cough. I apologize ahead of time. Two, I'm not going to insert any of the content. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add the divs. Another catch to this video is that I'm not going to use the div names that are on your wireframe. I can't do the whole assignment for you, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to code the divs similar to what is here. That way you have an idea on how to actually do the Stage 5 site. I'm not using the div names. I'm using similar divs. I'm not using the correct div dimensions. You're going to have to style all that on your own. However, if you follow along with what I do, it'll be a lot easier for you to accomplish this assignment. So we're going to start off over here in our HTML. You see I already have the style sheet linked right here, and here's my style sheet empty. So back over to my HTML, and I'm doing this in split view so you can kind of see it as I build it. Excuse me. So over here in my HTML, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to insert my container. So we got div ID equals quote container. And then down by the body tag, I'm going to put the closing div tag. And a little note reminding me closing container. Oops. There you go. Okay. So I'm going to space that out because I need all of my content inside of those tags. So I got the container. If I look over here at the design comp, I'm going to say there's going to be a header right here. And inside the header is going to be a div for this image and a div for this image. So we're going to do, let's see, div ID equals quote header. And go down a couple of lines. And we're going to close that div tag. I don't like how the new Dreamweaver indents my code. I might have to fix that. So again, this is closing header. And now remember over here, you don't see it, but there has to be a div that contains those two images. So I created the header. Now I'm going to put a div here and a div here. So for the first one, so we got the closing logo div. Oh, this is really annoying, this whole indent thing. And then div ID equals quote banner. Close it. Closing banner. So now my header is set up, right? I have the header, which is wrapping all of this together. I have the logo div, which is where you would insert the Stage 5 logo. And I have the banner div, which is where you would insert the banner up here. So now you could tell that beneath my header is going to be the navigation. So I'm going to go back to my source code. This is my closing header div, so I'm going to click below it. And we'll do div ID equals quote nav. And we're going to close that right away. Closing nav div, so I know that. Enter down. Don't understand why the code looks crazy. Okay, now underneath the nav div, we have our slider. If you look at a bunch of Web 2.0 sites, you can tell that this image would slide and there would be a new image every time. So we'll call this div ID slider. So we did the nav, and then we did the slider. Now it looks like we have three columns here. In one column, you have the image, heading tag, paragraph, and a read more link. Could be an H5 tag. And in this column, we have the same, just different image and different text. So we need only three columns. You don't need a div for each image and a div for each paragraph. You can put it all in one column. But to get that right, we need to create a wrapper around the columns. If you remember, we did that in the Striped Umbrella website. We created a wrapper and then we did a column group inside of the wrapper. So we're going to do the same thing here. Now I need to space this out because I got to put the columns inside of it, right? So I need to give it some room. That way I'm making sure I put them in the right spot. So here we'll do div class. We'll do just COL, short for column. And then I'm going to close it right away. And I'm just going to put close col 1 because that's the first column, which is the one all the way to the left. And just to make it simple so I don't have to keep typing, I'm going to copy that and I'm going to paste it and paste it. Now I got my three columns. I'm just going to edit the comment. That way I know this is the left column, middle column, right column, first column, second column, third column. And they're all inside my wrapper. There's my closing wrapper, my opening wrapper tag. Back here. Now, similar to the header, we did the header and then we did a logo div and a banner div. So here we'll do a footer and then we'll do a footer left and a footer right, all underneath the wrapper. So we have div ID equals quote footer. Close that div, and then I'm going to make my note so I'm aware. This is the close of the footer div. But I need to enter, this stinking indenting Dreamweaver. Can't always love the updates, right? So here's my footer div. Right there is the opening, there's the closing, and remember now I have to do a footer left and a footer right. And I'm going to close it right away. And then here I'm going to do my div footer left. And I'll close it right away. There we go. So now you can't see anything in the split view because we didn't add styles to it. So there's really nothing to see. But let's do a recap real quick. And I'm just going to go to code here. That way you can see everything. If I click on this, you can see it's highlighted down here. So we have the container. It's set up properly. And then here, you can see the banner. I'm sorry, you can see the header set up right there. Logo div, banner div. And we're doing this so we could double check to make sure we have all the closing div tags proper. And then we got nav, slider, wrapper, and you see the wrapper is closed down here because we have the 3 columns inside of it. Scroll down a bit. We have our footer div, which closes right above the container. We have footer right and footer left. So now what we'll do is we have the entire wireframe. I'm pretty sure I might have even used the correct names without looking at the wireframe, but we have the entire wireframe coded in the HTML. All the divs are set up. This is going to be the easiest way for you to accomplish your assignments, is by setting the divs up and then styling the divs. Once the divs are styled, then you could insert the images, and then you could insert the paragraph tags and things like that. But it's important to do it this way because then you're guaranteed that you are not forgetting a closing div tag. So I'll go back to split view. So again, we're working in CSS, we can see what's going on. Here we go. So the first line, if you recall from the striped umbrella, we always do a margin 0. We do the star and then the curly brackets, because the star indicates every HTML element. Margin 0, semicolon. Now what that does is that will correct all of your content and give you proper spacing so you can style it better yourself. Now that that is in, we're going to go ahead and do the container. So the container is an ID, so we got pound, container, curly brackets. Enter down, we'll do height, colon, we'll do 1200 pixels, semicolon, enter down width, colon, 960 pixels, enter down, margin 0 auto, and that centers the div. We're going to put a border. You don't need it for the striped umbrella assignment. If you look, there's no borders for these divs on here. However, I want you to be able to see it in the split view while we're building it. Now, I would encourage you not to put borders on these divs because it's not part of the PSD file. This is an example so you can see it being built in split view. So we'll do border, pound, we'll do gray, thin, solid, semicolon. And you can't really see it because it's the container, it takes up the entire space. But next we're going to do our header, which you should be able to see better. So we have pound header with our curly brackets, enter in, height, we'll do 150 pixels. Again, I am winging this. These are not the exact dimensions you're going to want to use for your assignment. It is up to you to determine the height and width of the images and set the divs up at that height. Now, the height of your assignment would be 960 pixels, but for example, these columns are going to be the width of the image. This div will be the width of the image. Okay? So it's important that you're doing that properly. The divs have to accommodate everything that's inside. So this div is the width of the image, but it's also going to be the height of the full column. So keep that in mind once we get there. So the header width will be 960 pixels. And I think that's all I have. Oh, we need to do a border for it so you guys could see it. And we got a border. So now you can see there's the bottom of the header right there. So next we got the logo div. Pound logo. Enter down. Height. We'll do 120 pixels. Width. Maybe 300 pixels. And I'll put the border in there. Oops. Did not mean to do that. The border in there, and you could see it, there it is. So that's where your logo would go. Now, might not want it pressed up against the corners like that, so what we'll do is add a margin. So we'll do, say, 10 pixels top, 0 pixels right, 0 pixels bottom, 10 pixels left. Now you see there's 10 pixels spacing here and here. Okay? So now after the logo div, we will do the banner div. So pound banner, height, 120 pixels, width, we'll do 400 pixels because I think the banner is longer than the logo. We'll put our border there. And look, it's wonky, right? It's not positioned where it's supposed to be. Well, that tells me I have to float some things. So first, I need to take into consideration that it won't float by itself. It has to follow what the logo div is doing. So I'm going to go back up here to the logo div and float it to the left, to the left, to the left. So now you see the banner div is overlapping it because it doesn't know where to go. Now if I go into the banner code and I float it to the right, now it's over here. See? All kind of making sense? And what we are going to do to the banner div is we're going to add margins. That way it's not pressed up against the top corner there. So for the top margin, we'll do 10 pixels. The right margin will do 10 pixels. Bottom 0 and left 0. And now you got 10 pixels space right here. And the logo is to the left. I'm going to spread this out so we can see it better. The logo would be here. The banner would be here. So next, underneath the header, we have to do the navigation. So we have pound nav, and we got a height of, I don't know, maybe say 50 pixels is probably even too much, but you could adjust it in your code for it to be appropriate to the stage 5 site. And the width, we're going to do a full 960 pixels. Enter down. And oops, I'm going to go ahead and put the border code in there. And there's our nav div right there. And beneath the nav div, we have the slider. So we're going to do pound slider. Height, say 420 pixels. Width, 960 pixels. And then the border so you could see it. There you go. So let's recap up here. We have the header area, the logo div, the banner div, navigation div, the slider div. Now remember, the dimensions that I'm using are probably not correct in regards to the heights for the stage 5 site. You have to do the research and sort out the correct heights on your own. After the slider div, we had the 3 columns. But those 3 columns have to be inside of a wrapper. That way they're contained and controlled in their space. So we have to do a wrapper. So pound wrapper. Height, we'll say 500 pixels. I know that's probably going to be too tall. Width, we'll do 960 pixels because that's to take up the whole screen. And then I'm going to do the border so you can see it. So that's the slider div. And if I scroll down more, that's the bottom of the wrapper div. And that's a lot bigger than it needs to be. So I'm going to alter the height of that. And we'll just say the height would be 350 pixels for the height of the wrapper. So I'm going to go down here in the CSS, and now we're going to do the code for the column. So if you remember in the HTML, the column is a class, not an ID. So because it's a class, we use the period, COL, enter down height, 340 pixels, the width, we'll say 300 pixels, semicolon, border. Let's see what happens when we look at the design. Now all of them are stacked on top of each other. So you can see here's a column, here's a column, here's a column. They're all stacked on top of each other when they should be next to each other. So what that tells me is I forgot to add the float, right? Because when you float, they follow each other. So we'll do float left. Now we'll take a look. And there you go. They're following each other now. Column 1, column 2, column 3. Except they're all left justified and there's this extra space over here. So that means we have to add a margin to separate them. So we're just going to do a margin left, colon, and we'll say 20 pixels, semicolon. Now 20 pixels was too much because this column dropped down. That means we took up too much space. So this is a good lesson for you to understand that if you use too much of a margin, then something isn't going to work properly. So we'll change it to 10. And then we'll go back here. So 10 pixels works because they're all next to each other, but again, there's a little bit more space over here than we need. Say 13. And look in here, 13 looks good. Columns are all next to each other and there's fairly identical space in between them all. So recap, we have the container, we have the header, the logo div, the banner div, the navigation div, and the slider div. We have the wrapper beneath the slider, which is in here, and then we have the 3 columns inside the wrapper. That means we have to do the navigation beneath the wrapper. So we're done styling that. So I could do pound, not navigation, but footer. Pound footer, my brackets, height, say 150 pixels. That's probably too much, but it'll be good for now. Width, 960 pixels. And the border, so you can see it down there. So there it is. There's the footer right there. So inside the footer, we have footer left and footer right. So we'll start with left because we read from left to right. Pound, footer left, and we got height. So we know the height of the footer is 150 pixels, so this does not have to be that big. So we could actually say 80 pixels high because it's just navigation. And then for the width, it's not going to take up that much space, so we can just probably do 350 pixels wide. And it has to stay to the left of the footer, footer left, so we're going to float it to the left. Float left. I'm going to add my border so you can see it. And there it is, right there. Now I don't necessarily want it pressing the top of the footer, so I'm going to drop it down a little bit just so you can see spacing. So here I'll just do margin top. We'll just do 10 pixels. And now you got the 10 pixel spacing right there. So now we have to do the image icons. So in the footer there are 3 individual icons with a copyright statement below it. And that would be inside of footer right. So we got pound, footer right, enter down, height. This one's going to be taller than footer left because of the icons and the copyright statement. So I'm going to say 120 pixels. And then width, I'm not sure what this one is going to be, so I'm going to go with 400 pixels. We're going to float it to the right. I'll add my border so you can see it, and there you go. Now again, just so you can see separation, I am going to add a margin there. The margin may be unnecessary when you get in your design. However, I'm going to put it so you could tell the difference in the divs. So we're going to do margin top, 10 pixels. And now you see the spacing there. So, excuse me, I'm going to show you guys a couple more things. And then I'm going to end the video, and you could use this as a reference for your Stage 5 homepage. When I look up here on my container, it's set at 1200 pixels. When I look at my design here, I can see that the footer ends right there and the container continues. Well, I could actually delete the height of the container and it will expand to the bottom of the footer. This will only work with the container. If you notice, all of the divs that I put in the style sheet, they all have a height and width. Every div has a height and width. And that's because we need to define position. In order to define position, we need something to position. So everything needs height and width. But once it is built, if I go to the container and I remove the height, and I check my code here, or I check my design, now you see the site ends at the bottom of the footer. Now I'm going to say this again. This is the only div you could do this to. Every div needs a height and width. Once the page is built, you can remove the height of the container. Alright? One more thing I'm going to show you. I'm going to enter down after that very first code, that star margin code right there, and I'm going to type in the word body and then put these curly brackets. Now body is going to reference my source code body tag up here. It's not a div ID, it's not a div class, so it does not require a pound sign and it does not require a period. It could stand alone. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say body background color pound 123 semicolon. I'm going to look at my full screen here, and now the entire background of the whole body of the website is black. So now all you would have to do is go into your source code, insert the images where they need to be, insert the text where it needs to be. Your navigation should be done in a list here and here. You'll insert the logo image, the banner image, the slider image. You'll insert the 3 images for the columns, and then you could go into the PSD file, select the layer, copy the text, and paste it inside the column below the image. And then you got your 3 image icons here that should be surrounded by probably a paragraph tag so they stay in order. And then below that you could use like an H5 tag for the copyright statement, just like we did in the striped umbrella. So what I just did for you here is I coded the entire wireframe for the Stage 5 site. I probably did it faster than you would have liked me to do it, and I apologize for that. However, it is beneficial for you because you can pause it and catch up. Okay? I will go to my code view here, and if you want, excuse me, you can actually take a screenshot right now and open it in another window so you could check your code in comparison to my code. Go ahead and take your screenshot. I will also go into my style sheet here. I'll scroll down a bit. So I'm going to start it right there. So we'll go from the star code all the way to the slider code. Take your screenshot. Now I'm going to scroll down so we get the bottom of it, the footer. So we'll go from wrapper to footer right. Go ahead and take your screenshot. So now you have a video explaining all the divs for the Stage 5 website or homepage, and then you were able to take screenshots of the code to double check what you have. Make sure you open and close every div in HTML. In the CSS, make sure every div has a height and width. If you could handle that, just putting in the content is going to be the easy part because it's a copy and paste or an insert image, and I'm confident that you can do it. So go ahead and try to knock this out and have it submitted on time. If you need an extension or you do have questions, please make sure you contact me in a private message on FSO. I don't always get notifications when it goes to the comment on the assignment. So make sure you're sending private messages or you're emailing me directly. I really hope this video helped you. And once again, let me know if you need a hand. Have a good night.